Wow, thank you so much. Uh, so, what do you do? What do you want to do to reach that vision for a peaceful society in 2035? What is your call to action? What is our call to action? And I want to start with you, Lauren.
Well, when we were preparing for today, I think Sandy and Antoinette shared a little bit, but one of the things I've been doing naturally since becoming a mom was supporting other mothers. Um, it wasn't anything that I was doing intentionally. It was just something that I knew needed to happen because the moment you have a baby enter this world, your life changes. And the most vulnerable moment of a woman's life is the day of birth. I mean, there is no ability to be prideful during that moment. You do not have any ego. All of that goes to the wayside when you are in the hospital room. And so, on both the day that Antoinette and Sandy had their boys, I reached out to them asking what they needed, supporting them, just wanting to be present in their lives. And I will tell you, I think to make change, we really need to continue to support other mothers. It might not be your best friend. It might not be somebody that you've had conversations with in depth about motherhood or life or politics or anything before. But I think just reaching out and sharing a hand with new moms, with a mom of another child, creating that coalition of support is so important. And I really think that once we as moms wrap our arms around one another and we support moms and we allow our children to feel supported and loved through motherhood, I think that 2035 marker, the future that we envision for our children will come so much easier. I think women in the past have always kind of sucked it up, and we've had motherhood as just this next level of life. And I know my mom and my grandmother have both shared how difficult it was for them, but it wasn't a time or a place for them to ever vent or to share how difficult it was. You were just a mom. And with our generation, we're lucky enough, we have platforms to share the difficult moments. We have platforms to continue to be vulnerable, to let down our walls, to let down our prideful moments. And Antoinette can attest, we talk on a daily basis, but there is many texts and many video chats about, what am I doing wrong? How do I change this? Somebody help me, come get my kid. And I think moments like that really will create a more peaceful society and just mothers helping mothers.
I think when we talk about change and how we get change, a lot of times we look to external. What would we do to change society? But I think change really starts with us. And then it starts with who we raise and how we raise them. And I think, my game plan with my daughter is to just expose her to as much as possible. I talked earlier a little bit about the polarization, the different labels that we give. And, I don't want to raise my child in the echo chamber of my beliefs. I don't want to raise a strong Sikh woman or a strong Democrat. What I want to raise is a good human being, someone who can look at the world, understand diversity, and she can figure out for her own where she stands, and not be so consumed with labels and all of the other things. So that's something that in my life, I want to make sure that I make a priority for my daughter, and just teaching them to find passion, to find purpose, and pursue it. When it comes to some of the issues that I talked about before, whether it was the farmers' protest or the other things, I mean, she's 5.5, right? Some of these conversations are truly heavy, and they're too heavy. I wasn't ready for half of them, but they're here. And when you're a mother, it's not always the best timing. Things don't happen the way you plan. And what I do is navigate it the best I can and try to teach her and give her the tools that she can use to help figure out how things go. And I want to teach her to pursue passion, and I want to teach her to act. I don't want her to be passive. I want her to know that when we feel something strongly, even if it doesn't have to do with our own quote unquote community. It's not an issue that's only felt by Indians, but I want you to be able to be that voice for whoever it is and to stand up and to act. So thank you.
So I'll start with a story, a quick story. So Braxton and I were at a playground in town, and another mom was there with her kids, and we started casually kind of chatting about life and our professions and our family and how tired we were. And at one point in the conversation, she commented about how handsome Braxton was, and she then stated that he was going to be this, like, I could see him being this amazing football player when he grows up. And it gave me a little bit of pause when she said that, because I hadn't mentioned anything about sports. I mean, he's 2, right? So I didn't really understand the connection. And at first I thought, whatever, just move on, you know, but I actually ended up kind of challenging her by simply just asking, oh, what makes you say that? And there was this long, awkward pause. And I initially I wanted to fill the space, right? I just changed the subject, let's move on and just go on. But I kind of sat there uncomfortably for a while until she provided a response. And we actually ended up having a really productive conversation. So my call to action for myself is to continue having conversations like that. When I hear implicit biases and when I hear gender or racial stereotypes, like, speak up about it. I want to challenge it. I want to, if I see something, I want to say something. And not in a disruptive way, not in a confrontational way, but in a productive way that actually moves the conversation and the agenda forward. Another thing that I'm committed to doing is just to make sure that Braxton is aware of some of the gender and racial stereotypes that are out there. For example, you know, science and math are for the men, you know, engineers are for the men. English and liberal arts are for the women. Growing up, I heard this all the time. And I remember this one specific instance where I made a C in math, and one of my teachers told me, like, oh, it's okay, women really aren't good in math. So I remember, like, not really trying as hard moving forward because I felt I kind of had a free pass not to, until my parents, I brought home that second C and they weren't having it. So, you know, that at that moment, I remember them having a conversation with me about, like, no, math is not for men. Like, you do good at everything that you put your mind to, you know? And I know this is so cliche, but I want Braxton to be whatever his heart desires. And I'm committed to exposing him to as much as I can. Last thing, I'm HR, I mentioned I'm an HR manager at Amazon. And, you know, right now we're spearheading the formation of a lot of different affinity groups. And these groups bring employees together across, like, businesses, across locations around the world, and they play a huge role in building, like, internal networks and leading service projects. And it just gives the associates overall, like, a sense of acceptance and belonging. There are 11 affinity groups that Amazon has, and here at Bakersfield, since September, we've launched 4. So we've launched the BEN group, which is the Black Employee Network. We've launched Women in Amazon. We've launched Warriors at Amazon, which is for anyone that's in the military. And we've launched Latinos at Amazon. There's 7 more. And one of my call to actions is to make sure that we launch as many more as we can, so that every one of our associates feel welcome and that they feel represented.
So I think just from our conversation today, we can all agree that, you know, empathy is really needed, and that is going to be a tool for us to build a peaceful society. And I think what I want to do is challenge all of us to put that into practice on a daily basis. And, you know, it might look different for everybody in, you know, how we practice empathy. But for myself, you know, as a professional in the field that I'm in doing anti-trafficking work, we very much practice through almost everything that we do. We practice things through a trauma-informed lens. And I really want to invite everyone to really look into what that means and what what ways we can utilize that in our daily life. So just understanding that every single one of us as human beings, we've all endured some sort of trauma. And, you know, that experience of trauma may look different, but we've all experienced something. So just allowing each other and ourselves to give grace to people when they are, you know, maybe doing something that we don't agree with or doing something that may be offensive, really giving them grace and understanding that maybe that's a trauma response. Maybe it comes from trauma. And I think that's a good way for us to step into a conversation, a larger conversation about empathy, you know, what it means to really step into someone else's shoes and not pity them and not just, you know, stop at sympathy, because that's a totally different thing, but stepping into someone else's shoes and really for a moment feeling their pain and sharing in that experience, and then, you know, navigating how to move forward after that. So, I just really promote trauma-informed care in everything. And, you know, I talked a little bit ago about how I would love for us to, you know, actively be proactive in being inclusive. For anyone who's ever worked with me or had any conversations with me about anything professional, you know that I'm extremely, extremely passionate about ensuring that, you know, making language access available throughout Kern County, making that a common practice, that is one of my #1 priorities. And I think that is a good pathway to ensuring that, you know, all voices are heard. And you can imagine in my line of work, if people are being harmed, people are enduring violence, how can they even speak up and ask for help if they're not given a mechanism to voice their concerns and to voice that, you know, they're needing a way out of a dangerous situation? That's just very commonsensical to me, a very commonsensical approach for us to be more inclusive, to build that bridge with various communities. And so I guess, you know, that in a larger context is really being proactive in finding out what are the barriers that marginalized communities are experiencing, and use that knowledge to inform all of the actions that we you know, take on as organizations or institutions, and just making sure that those voices are amplified and are truly leading the work that we're doing. And I think those two tools will help us build a peaceful society.